newly published book entitled The True American. Our first guest is Dr. Cress Welsing. Joining me in the questioning is Richard Prince from the Washington Post. Mr. Prince has the first question.
Yes, Dr. Welsing, it's been about a year ago since you were dismissed from Howard University, and at the time I recall you charged that your Cress Theory, which in brief holds that whites are inferior to blacks because of the lack of melanin, was responsible for that dismissal. And I'm wondering whether you still believe that and what proof you have of that.
Well, Dick, I do believe it. I was dismissed from Howard, fired from Howard in June 1975. In November 1974, while still at Howard, I heard a rumor that I was going to be blocked from promotion and tenure because of my views, not because of my academic work. And I went immediately to the Dean of the College of Medicine, Dr. Marion Mann, and I asked him, I said, Dr. Mann, I hear that I am going to be blocked from promotion and tenure because of my views. And Dr. Mann responded, to be frank with you, Dr. Welsing, this paper that you wrote, and I said, the Cress Theory of Color Confrontation, he said yes. He went on to say that it did not make sense for me to say that white people were envious of black people because white people lack skin pigmentation. And we went on from that point. But let me make one correction. My theory does not say that whites are inferior to blacks. I don't say that. I say that whites feel that they are inferior because they cannot produce skin pigmentation and because their status as, I say, a variant of albinism is genetic recessive to blacks, and they can be genetically annihilated by non-white people, that this is what causes that sense of inadequacy, that they have built a total behavioral system that is a compensation. White supremacy is a compensation for a sense of white genetic inadequacy.
I see. One other follow-up on that, and that is, what background in genetics do you have to enable you to document that theory?
Well, I'm a medical doctor, and all medical doctors receive or take courses in genetics. And this is very, very basic genetics. And it not only is very basic genetics, this is common lay knowledge. And we hear it, the dominance, the genetic dominance of black over white is heard in the expression, one drop of black blood makes you black. In other words, if you were to relate to a white female, the product of that relationship would be an individual that is identifiable as what is called non-white. They would have something, I mean, the curliness of the hair, the darkness of the skin would make the child look more like you than like the mother.
I see.
Dr. Welsing, your theory to me seems to infer some innate behavior on the part of a human being because they are, quote, black or white. Would you agree or disagree that the terms black and white are not genetic definitions? And if they are not genetic definitions, then how could your theory be true?
Well, wait a minute. When you say genetic definitions, I'm not quite sure what you say, but for the sake of time, the factors that determine whether we're going to have skin pigmentation or whether we lack skin pigmentation is based on genes. In other words, you have genes that determine the quantity of melanin pigment that is going to be produced in your skin, in your eyes, in your hair. If you have a gene, a mutation towards an inability to produce that pigment, that is also genetically determined. And that is at least within the context of the Western world or the white supremacy culture. The dominant classification of people, not as determined by Cress Welsing, but as determined by white people themselves, is your classification. Either you are white or you are classified as non-white. This is on your birth certificate. This is on every paper of identification that you have. And this focus on skin coloration, I maintain, is based on the awareness on the people who are now in power, that they are a minority. The white group represents a minority in the world population. And the color focus is something that is a psychological, I say a psychological necessity based on a genetic reality. So I don't know if this gets to your question. Now, any other thing that one might say that results from the absence of pigment, I mean, that's another discussion. I don't know whether you want to go into that.
Well, following that logic, then, would it not be accurate to say that there would be a difference psychologically in light-skinned blacks from dark-skinned blacks?
Well, psychologically, yes, and I think that we are all aware of that. Under white supremacy, the conditioning has been the closer you are to white, the more acceptable you are. So that, for example, all of us learned as we were growing up in the black community, if you are black, stay back. If you are brown, stick around. If you are yellow, you're mellow, and if you're white, you're right. And the appreciation of an individual, even within the black group itself, was very often based on the relative absence of skin pigmentation. And even within families, children thought that they were ugly if they were darker. And families, parents have said that to children. Even now, people want to know when a baby is just born in the hospital, some of the first questions that are asked by the black parents about the child or the black family members, is it light skin and does it have straight hair? To know how much value we're going to put on this new baby. Because within the framework of the culture in which we live, the closer you are to white, the more you're considered beautiful, and perhaps under some circumstances, the more opportunities you will have.
Well, Dr. Welsing, if it is true that you were dismissed from Howard because of your views on that subject, what would you say then of the implications for academic freedom at Howard University?
Well, I say that, first of all, Howard University is a black university in name only. In other words, those who fund an institution within the framework of a political system, those who fund an institution determine what is going to be done within the framework of that institution. And so although Howard University is referred to as a black university and the majority of the student body is black and the majority of the faculty is black, still it is possible, I say it is possible, that those people who control the purse strings can say, we do not like such and such an ideology or philosophy that is coming out of this center. If this continues to come out, then we will not give you funds for building and we will not give you funds to continue the functioning of your center. Now you make your choice.
Well, are you saying that this happened in your case, or was it simply the case of one dean saying this to you? I mean,
well, let's put it this way. I can only suspect that it happened if you ask me to prove it, because I will say that the same funding forces or sources, if they said, well, we like very much what Dr. Welsing is doing. First of all, no one has been able to disprove what she's saying. That we think this is very interesting. I mean, whether the theory is correct or incorrect, it's a valuable idea to discuss, or it is being discussed a lot. We're glad to have that debate going on in an academic institution. We think that individual ought to stay there. Then that individual would be there.
What about the Board of Trustees and the president of the university? What have they said about what happened to you?
Well, the Board of Trustees and the president of the university concurred in the decision to dismiss me, despite the fact that the chairman of my department and the executive committee in my department recommended that I be promoted and given tenure. Also, the Committee on Appointments and Promotions within the College of Medicine also recommended that I be promoted and given tenure.
So what do you do now, then? What is your next step?
Well, right now we have been involved in several grievance committee hearings, and I have a lawyer, and the university has a lawyer, so I don't know what the outcome of it is going to be. But my charge is that I was removed from the university as a breach of my academic freedom because the discussion centered around the paper that I wrote, and that someone disagreed, namely the dean. I mean, he's the one who made the statement to me that he disagreed with the content of the theory. Although I told him I had many documents, I have many, many letters from white people in this area of the world and in foreign countries who have written to me and said, yes, I have always wished that I had more melanin. And I said that to the dean. I don't ask black people what white people think about themselves. I ask white people, or they will tell me what they think about themselves. And anybody who watches the phenomena of sun tanning, millions and millions and millions and millions of white people, the minute the sun is out, lying in the sun, taking the chance of getting skin cancer to get dark, cannot tell me that white people are satisfied with the way that they look.
Dr. Welsing, you've charged, in a sense, that the climate of academic freedom at Howard University is threatened. The Washington Post has said in an editorial that the leadership of Howard University was wavering. Therefore, it was not stable, and Howard really didn't have a definite sense of mission. Now, do you feel, in the context of those two statements, that the era of academic freedom or the climate of academic freedom at Howard includes whites who teach there, or do you feel it's basically relegated to the blacks who have theories, quote, that might be controversial or unacceptable?
Well, Tony, I don't want to get off into comparing whether it applies to whites or whether it applies to blacks, whether whites can say what they want at Howard and whether blacks cannot. I will simply say, and I honestly do not fault the leadership at Howard University within a certain sense. In other words, we are an oppressed people in a power system that I maintain supports white domination. If you are going to work and function within that context, you have to go by the rules that have been set up. Now, this may not have anything to do with truth. It may not have anything to do with justice. It may not have anything to do with reality. But I say that the pressure is there on the leadership in so-called black institutions, we might even say as far as television programs are concerned. If you are going to say the wrong thing that makes the people who control the purse strings unhappy, then chances are that you are not going to have that opportunity very long. If what you are saying is conceived of as a threat to the status quo, or if what is being taught or what is being propagated in some way will change the minds of the listeners so that people begin to behave in a different way because they begin to think of things in a different perspective or from a different angle.
Well, my question in asking for a comparison of academic freedom vis-a-vis black professors, yes, or white professor, referred specifically to a case of a white professor from South Africa named, yes, Rubin, who has been dismissed, qualifiedly dismissed or whatever it is from the university, yes, and basically because the students did not believe he had the right to say what he wanted to say at the university, which parallels, if I'm following you correctly, the fact that you are alleging that you have been fired, in fact, because you had the temerity to say, theoretically, what you said.
Well, let me just go, I look at that particular case, there's the case of Dr. Rubin, who the students had charged that he was negligent in his duties towards the student body. Now, all these charges have been washed away, but this was essentially, as I understand it, what happened. They alleged that he had done a couple of things that some people had said were racist, and also that he had been negligent in his responsibilities. Well, when that happened, all of the newspapers that are white-owned and supported went to his defense. How dare Howard University remove this individual who was an anti-apartheid, meaning an anti-white supremacy, anti-racist, took an anti-racist position in South Africa, that this man has, in quotes, demonstrated his interest in black people or non-white people. Now, I just look at that case in this way. Here is an individual that, as far as the media in the District of Columbia is concerned, they defended this man because he had taken an anti-racist, anti-apartheid position in South Africa. But there's Cress Welsing, who has written a paper and a theory on white supremacy, has to be dismissed from the same institution because I consider myself a counter-racist, a person who is moving against an unjust and negative force of white supremacy. But I have to be dismissed because I wrote a theory that was against white supremacy. But an individual who is classified as white, who took a position so-called an anti-white supremacy position in South Africa, he is defended as being someone who should be at a black institution. Defended at least by the media. Do you see what I'm saying? Because one of the papers in Washington, the Evening Star, in an editorial said, well, apparently Howard University has a small group of racists, meaning black people who are supposed to be against white people, faculty and students who are anti-white, and now it's time to weed out all of the other black people who have an anti-white position. Now, this is said in a city in which there are two major white universities who have very, very small black student bodies and very, very small percentages of blacks on their faculty. But there's no examination or no gross criticism of the white dominance and presence at the two white institutions, but let's weed out if there are other black people who in any way can be looked at as being against whites, well, then attack that black center. And it's a lot of chaos and confusion, but I think that if it is understood the dominant dynamic in this area of the world, the dominant dynamic that is going on throughout the world is white domination. I don't think that anyone can refute that. The persons who have the power in the world today, all of it is in the hands of people who themselves classify themselves as white as opposed to non-white. That is where the power is. If we understand that, we can understand everything else.
We have time for one short question. And one short response.
Oh, I see. Well, this was going to be longer, but anyhow, you said that the operating dynamic is racism, in essence.
White supremacy.
White supremacy.
Yes.
Do you make any allowances for economic domination or any class differences?
Okay, very, very quickly. The system of white supremacy is a dynamic that encompasses all areas of people activity. That means economics, education, entertainment, labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. You have a behavioral system that is in all of those areas of activity seeking to establish white supremacy. I say that the class positions in that society are white upper class, white middle class, white lower class, and then non-white, non-class, irrespective of income. Income is not power.
Thank you very much. I'm
Okay.
sorry to have to interrupt, but we'll have to thank you so much, Dr. Welsing, for being on Black Journal.